atom of
Sorry,
our
Norm.
bodies. All right. Came originally from the land, and everything we've ever eaten or drank, or medicines or shelters we've created, also came from the land. So the land is our greatest grandmother, our oldest ancestor, and the ancestor we share with the dinosaurs, in fact. And she has provided us everything since before the beginning. She's provided everything without limit, without condition, without interruption. She's given all this to us, to not only us, but all creatures. And that's the way we know that the land loves us, because that unconditional giving of everything forever is essentially the definition of love. So that's how we know that the land loves us so dearly. And having thanked the land, I also thank the people who've taken care of these lands. And for these lands here in so-called Vancouver, it's been the Musqueam and the Squamish and the Tsleil-Waututh people who've taken care of these lands for at least 15,000 years since the last ice age melted. And they did such a good job taking care of these lands that these lands were actually better than new when the first explorers arrived. That's why the salmon runs were beyond their belief. The forests were bigger than they could ever imagine, and the buffalo herds were immensely vast. So we give thanks to the people for taking care of these lands in such a good way and fulfilling their responsibility to take care of the lands, to manage them, to protect them, to defend them, and use them in a good way, and to leave them as good as or better than they were provided. So we give thanks to them so that we could live here and also sit in a circle, a virtual circle here together, and share our gifts and everything around us, our best good judgment, so that we can help each other and ourselves and the people and the land. So we give thanks for all that, and hope that we have a really good panel tonight. Thank you. All our relations.
Thank you so much, Norm. We're just going to adjust our technical difficulties on this side, but I think we have. We were getting some feedback. But thank you, Norm, for your support in the community and your teachings and your holistic vision for the community that we're working really hard to align ourselves with. It's a long process of learning, but a really good and meaningful process. Thank you. Also, a shout out to Terry and Savannah from the Heart of the City Festival and all the staff. Thank you for connecting the dots with all of us, as you do every year with this wonderful Heart of the City Festival. And also for your vision for the future. Maybe we're going to have an SRO museum one day in collaboration with groups from the neighborhood. And also a big thank you to the Right to Remain Collective for all the capacity building that you've been doing to share your strengths and share your support with the SRO tenants through the SRO Collaborative. So my name is Wendy Pedersen, and I've lived in the neighborhood for about 30 years, and I've been organizing with SRO tenants more than full time since 2015, and really grateful to be here with everybody. What is the SRO Collaborative? We're a group that is putting all of our energy into the tenants who are living in privately owned SROs. So there's about 4,000 tenants living in about 100 buildings in the Downtown Eastside and on Granville South areas. And we're doing all kinds of stuff because those folks have been invisibilized to the community in many ways for many years. So we've been, it's a whole other topic, but we've been doing tenant-based initiatives in the hotels, setting up tenant committees, doing harm reduction work, all from a community organizing perspective with tenants in the lead. So you're here tonight. Welcome, everybody. It looks like there's a lot of people on this call. We can see you up on the wall, which is great. What's going to happen tonight? Well, the purpose of this gathering today is for all of you to learn about vacancy control and to hear from tenants about why they want it and learn about the policy proposed at City Hall so that you can understand it and find out how you can support. So we're going to hear personal stories from tenants about why it's important. And we'll also have some nerdy policy discussion because I know there's policy nerds out there. I can see one of them laughing right now, Tanya, who's I'd like to acknowledge Tanya, who's from the Renters Advisory Committee here for the City of Vancouver. Welcome, Tanya. So we're going to start with a round of introductions from our panelists and just check out how our room works here. And also some of our panelists are on Zoom. And before we do that, just to say that our goal is to have the panelists introduce themselves. I'm going to do an opening 5 minutes, and then each panelist is going to take about 5 minutes. And we're going to get you to 8 o'clock with some pretty interesting discussion from this group. And then we're going to open it up from 8 to 9 and have an interactive question and answer period. And if you have any questions you have that are burning and you don't want to write them down, you can put them in the chat. And Sanjana is here monitoring the chat, and we'll queue your question up when it's time to hear from from the audience. And we also have some audience here too. We have esteemed tenant SRO tenants in the room, which is so great. And also some of our students, academics from the Right to Remain project. So who's on the panel? Why don't we start with introduction from Tom?
My name's Tom DeGrey. I'm with the Right to Remain and the SRO Collaborative. I'm more or less a founding member of both groups. I'm wearing the Right to Remain cap, and I'm going to speak about that very, very briefly. It's a research project which is studying displacement. And there's been waves of displacement in the Downtown Eastside. Obviously, the first one was Indigenous people, but also the Japanese community was displaced. Right now, we're experiencing displacement of poor people, right? And it's very aggressive, very egregious. Poor people, by definition, can't afford to go anywhere, and they get scattered. Okay.
Hi, hello, can you hear me? Okay, well, I'm a tenant at an SRO here. I also work with the R2R, the Right to Remain. So I work with the Hub program and a few other programs in the city, trying to bring the people together and find more solutions and solve a few more problems.
Hi, my name's Richard Schwab. I'm a tenant at the Arlington. I'm also a researcher for the Right to Remain, and I'm on the board of directors of the SROC. And that's it for now.
Hello, my name is Tintin. I work at the Downtown Eastside Neighbourhood House, and I'm really glad to be here. Thank you.
And my name is Jeff Masuda, and I am one of the team of the Right to Remain Collective. I'm a recent arrival. I'm at the University of Victoria School of Public Health and Social Policy. And maybe just take a moment to also acknowledge that the Right to Remain is inclusive of several other partners, including the Heart of the City Festival. And so we're very grateful to the Heart of the City Festival to providing this amazing platform for us year after year to help us to mobilize our perspectives and our stories.
Okay, and then our online panelists, Norm, do you want to do a quick intro?
Hi, my name is Norm Leech. I'm
Oh, maybe that's our end. Go for it.
hello? Yeah. My name is Norm Leech. I'm the executive director at the Vancouver Aboriginal Community Policing Center. We address issues of injustice for urban Indigenous people in the city of Vancouver. There's roughly 50 to 70,000 Indigenous people in the Vancouver area, and most of them aren't from here, they're from far away. So we address those issues and we work. And there's no shortage of injustice issues that they face, whether it's homelessness or poison drug supply or violence or police discrimination, or missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. So happy to be here. Thanks.
Thanks, Norm. Emily?
List of new executives.
Yeah, just send that out. Yeah,
Oh, somebody's got to turn their mute
it's very
on.
brave of you. It's good. It's so
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. We'll see how it goes.
Uh-oh. Okay, go for it, Emily.
Great. Thanks so much, Wendy. My name is Emily Rogers. I'm coming to you from Victoria, which is the territory of the Kwanglen speaking peoples. I work at Together Against Poverty Society. I've worked here since 2016 as a tenant legal advocate. So I provide legal information and advice and representation to tenants who are going through disputes with their landlords at the residential tenancy branch. And tonight I will act as one of those nerdy policy people and provide a bit of insight onto the Residential Tenancy Act and how it relates to what we're talking about today.
Am I up? Sorry. Oh, okay. Sorry about
Thought
that.
maybe you couldn't hear us or we're trying to get your mute
Yeah,
off.
I did. Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
can you?
Hear me okay now?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Alexandra Flynn, and I'm an assistant professor at the University of British Columbia's Law School. I'm really grateful to be joining you to talk about the kind of legal sides of vacancy control, including the power that the City of Vancouver has to enact rules and regulations regarding vacancy control. And just really honored to join this collection of people.
Thanks, Alex. We're doing pretty good with a room full of people and people up there technologically. Well, it seems to be going good so far. So, okay, why are we here, everybody? So this is the most important decision facing SRO tenants that City Council has made since the SRA bylaw was passed in 2005. Just to give you a bit of historical background, before 2005, Expo happened in the 80s. And back in the 80s, people were traumatized by the number of evictions that were happening in the hotel, or the conversion of the hotel stock and into tourist use. So it took about 15 years from in 1986 to 2005 for the community to mobilize, get a city council, a council elected, and get this SRA bylaw in place. Well, the SRA bylaw basically protected the SROs, the single room occupancy hotels, from converting only to condominiums, tourist uses, or office uses. It was great. It was totally needed, and it kind of met the need for from the Expo evictions. And there was a conversion fee of a penalty of $5,000 per room back then in 2005. But soon as that got passed, there was an uptake in a softer form of conversion. It was a more slow and insidious conversion, and it was happening between between tenants. When a tenant moved out, the rents would go up, and that invisible flipping kept going, and the community started to rally again in 2005, 2006. I was around, and we saw some of those buildings get squatted by the Anti-Poverty Committee, and so this process right now has accelerated, and it's accelerating now. And we're losing about 3 or 4 hotels every year to this process, with rent increases going up beyond what people can afford. And it's leading to homelessness, a lot more homelessness. And there's very little SRO replacement housing coming. It's not like they're building a lot of welfare rate, old age pension rate, social housing in the community or anywhere in Vancouver for that matter. So just before our speakers fill in the blanks about what's happening, there were 5 key events since 2017 that have happened to get us to this historic moment right now. The stage has basically been set, and you guys are all the actors out there that are needed at the last minute to help us win this thing. So how did the stage get set? Well, scene 1, basically, many of us quit our jobs in 2017 and organized to get a better city council. And I know a lot of you in the room helped, and we're right there on the front lines making that happen, and a lot of you out there in the audience as well. Scene 2, early December 2019, Councillor Swanson puts forward a motion called Slow the Loss of Low-Income Housing. If anybody's got a copy of that motion and wants to put it in the chat right now, that would be really great. It's an important historical document. So we mobilized hundreds of people for that motion. It was unanimous, but the catch was it was focused on getting the province, lobbying the province to protect the SROs from the rapid conversion. So it passed, which was great. And that was in early December. And then at Christmas, the mayor wrote a letter to the province saying, do this thing. And the province wrote back in like February and said, no. That was Minister Selena Robinson. Okay, scene 3. COVID, March 2020. The community freaked out because there's all these tenants sharing bathrooms in their hotels. And everybody thought, including the city of Vancouver, that tenants were going to get wiped out like in New York. We were looking at all that what was happening in New York on TV, and people were so scared. So basically COVID laid bare all the vulnerabilities of the tenants in these hotels. The city worked day and night, I can attest, the city staff with us to help prevent a disaster. And they learned a lot. Scene 4. 5 months later, September 2020, they came back with a proposal to their city council, their bosses, the mayor and council. So the staff came with a report saying, you need to raise $1 billion to buy these, buy all the SROs. They also said you should double that SRA conversion fee, which had been going up, year after year. But they said basically put it at $230,000 to convert one room to a condo or an office. And the last thing they put in that historic report was tell us to go away and develop a municipal version of vacancy control. I think they put it in there because of Councillor Swanson's motion. So they did their due diligence and they brought it back to council and they said, if you want us to do this, you're gonna have to tell us to do it again. Like tell us to do it. So that report passed. So that gets us to the final scene of the act. This act, which is November 16th or thereabouts of this year, that proposal for the municipal vacancy control or the municipal mechanism to control rents in SROs is coming back to council. And we need a mayor and council who will support this proposal. And why it's so important, Tom, I'm going to pass it over to you. We got to get the mic here. So Tom, first tell everybody again the technical, what is vacancy control?
Well, vacancy control ties your rent or the rent in a particular unit to the unit itself and not the person. As things are now, you move out and your landlord can put your old place on the market and charge what the market will bear. And I think my place is an excellent example of the dangers of that. It's called Kiefer Cabins. It's very old, 120 years old. There are 12 suites in it. The suite in the front, which I might add, it's been somewhat renovated cosmetically, is going for $1,100. I live in the back and I'm paying $384. My landlord wants me gone, period. And he's more than willing to illegally evict me. How do they do that? They just lie, right? The I've heard them actually discussing, my manager, my landlord, discussing the lies they're gonna tell about the old tenants. How do we get rid of these people? So it's a very precarious situation to live in. If I lose my home at my income and my age, I'm in very big trouble indeed. And this is why I'm part of the right to remain in SROC to defend myself against illegal eviction. And so far, it's worked quite well. The SROC has, as it's developed, gained some real muscularity, and landlords know about us, and they know we'll take them on by any legal means possible. So that's good. I now have some defense. And as a matter of fact, that's how I met Wendy. I was being illegally evicted, and she helped me survive. So anything else I can add, Wendy? Or?
Yeah, and just your.
Oh,
yeah.
well, what does it feel like to be
Yeah.
under that threat of eviction? Well, we've all, most of us, have been harassed. We've been bullied in school, or we've had a bad boss. If you're being harassed in your own home, it's much worse because you can't escape. You have nowhere to go. I remember I had a bad boss once. At the end of my working day, I just go home and lock my door. Next morning, I get up, I'd have to face him again. So it's a very upsetting way to live, very distressing. I'm not a person who suffers stress very easily. And through that period, I assure you, I was very stressed and unhappy because it was homelessness is lethal. The life expectancy of homeless people are said to be half of what they should be. So the threat of homelessness is the threat of dying young, essentially. Anything else I can
No,
add?
that's good, but we'll come back to you, Tom.
Oh.
So yeah, there's always 3 or 4 hot spots in the neighborhood, like Tom's Hotel, where the landlord's aggressively trying to kick out the tenants to raise the rents. But Nicole is in a hotel where that's not exactly the situation. But Nicole, tell us what % of your total income you're paying on rent.
I pay 83% of my income to my rent. And if we don't get rent control, these numbers are going to increase along with the homeless because there's about 4,000 people in my position that are going to end up exactly where I'm going to end up if the rents continue because I'm not going to have 100% and have nothing to like live off of. There's only the streets left. And with that increase, there's going to be crime. There's going to be more COVID. There's going to be more deaths between COVID and due to overdoses, due to people losing their jobs because you can't go to work in dirty clothes and bad, poor hygiene, which you're going to have with no regular water and no regular washing, etc. Like these are facts that will happen. It's not negotiable if we don't get rent control. Everyone's paying the same. The rents increase every time somebody moves out, though. I know that for a fact that there's one old fella that passed away during the heat wave. His rent room will be rented for $750. He was paying $595. So the rents will increase every time somebody moves on. It's without this rent control. But I wasn't. I was financially safer. But emotionally and physically, I was in more harm's way because there was no control on the people. And I don't want to get into that, but Yeah, no, you were guaranteed safety, but that's only for 2 years. Because once that ends, it's gonna end up as Tom's situation where his building got massively increased. It's not gonna have any like self-control about going, oh, well, we should only jacket a couple hundred. They're gonna jacket 400 or 500 just to make up for lost time. So these SROs that are far and few between, we're gonna lose them all.
Yeah, so Nicole is not facing an aggressive landlord right now that's shoving up the rents, like Tom is, and some other hot spots that are going on in the neighborhood, but there's this gradual increase. And not too long ago, that hotel was at 375, and now they're going up to 750. And that's shocking for the conditions that they've got there. Okay, Richard. So Richard is in a similar place like Nicole, but why don't you tell us about it, Richard?
Well, the hotel was sold about, was it about 2 years now? 2 years ago, and unfortunately, some of the tenants were afraid of like the rents going up that they moved out. Like 3 people moved out, and I didn't understand why. It was like, why not wait and see what's going to happen? So we wait and saw what happened, and basically those 3 or 4 units were at 375 or 400 to rent, and they're all the same size. Um, Unfortunately, the rents went from that to 525 to 575 or 600 or 700, depending if you wanted a base suite in the front, which, not much space there, but and we're in this speculative arena here of the landlord who I won't name names, but basically his goal is to, suss out all the people that he can and raise the rents there. But if that doesn't happen, then he'll just wind up selling it off to someone else who is really aggressive and would harass tenants like daily until they were either offered bribes or just couldn't handle it and decide to move out, or who's going to put up with harassment. So that's his game plan. And if he can't do it himself, he'll flip the building and someone else will do that, because there are people out there who do this, and we do have many examples, don't we?
We do. You can tell them about the one in the Bad Manners,
The bad manners.
AKA Georgia Manners.
Yeah. Unfortunately, a few weeks back or a month and a half back, we had spoken to some tenants there, and I guess there were maybe 20% or so that hadn't fit into the conversion phase, I guess you could call it, where they were aggressively being pursued to leave, and by all means, and to the point where you're going, this doesn't happen, does it? And yes, unfortunately it does. And they were paying, I guess, the lower end, which was like 450 to 500 or something. But, they did a cosmetic job up a few floors up, and they basically raised the rents, I think, to 1,000. So by getting these 20 other people out, that's, if you do the math, you go, oh, well, let's, bribe them or harass them to the point of where they have to leave. And that, rent control will stop that from happening.
Great. Norm, do you want to say something on behalf of the community who's been paying attention to this issue? Why it's important, what you're hearing?
Well, this came to our attention during COVID when everyone was scrambling to respond to the multiple crises that were affecting everybody in the Downtown Eastside. And so we were able to share some resources that we had in order to help feed people and respond to the overdose deaths that soared again during the COVID crisis. And we saw so many other groups scrambling just to keep people alive and housed. And we I've learned so much from Wendy and all the other people in food groups. We just started saying we all have to get together to fight these battles and support each other, because everybody's getting left in the dust. And it's these global market systems that are killing everybody. They're relentless and they're ruthless and they don't care. And all we're asking is for a little bit of protection, a little bit of shelter from those global markets that just want to make capital, make profits off of everything, whether it's water or food or land or houses. So if we can convince actual human beings to do the right thing, to be good human beings, then maybe this city can be the city that it tries to sell itself as a city that has a heart that cares about people. But it has to align itself with people rather than stuff or money. And to us, like, we've been really on this decolonizing journey for especially the last 2 years. And that's what this is about for us, because for Indigenous people, it's easy for us to say, you know what, all these negative things that are happening to us, whether it's homelessness, whether it's poverty, whether it's pandemic, whether it's patriarchy, whether it's misogyny, whether it's missing and murdered women, whether it's drugs, we connect it all to colonization. So it's easy for us to say it's all came from colonization. But we realize that not everyone, it's not that easy for everyone until they look at it deeper. Because back in your family history, there's colonization too. And it brought all these things with it then too. So we started thinking, is there a decolonized approach, not only to housing, but to poverty too? And for us, it's all about connection. We are so connected to land, and we're so connected to everything on the land that we know it's not just property. We know they're relatives. And we cannot treat it like property. We just can't. And if we can teach, remind, revive that connectedness feeling with everyone, then we'll learn how to be good human beings again on this planet. Because really, to be born human here on this planet is really the greatest gift in the universe. Because for these mountains, this weather, these foods, these people, this is it's fantastic. But somehow some people got stuck in this idea that it's property, and that's such a desolate universe to live in. That in that universe, everyone's alone. But in our universe, nobody is ever alone. And that's such a better universe to live in. So we're really trying to engage in the conversation about what does it mean to decolonize? And what does it mean to be colonized? And what has it brought? And what has it led to? And what are the harms that have come with colonization? Because for us, it's so clear that colonization has been and continues to be the greatest crime against humanity ever committed. And in the name of colonization, women have been the greatest victims of colonization. And for our women, especially because they're Indigenous as well, but women around the world are no longer safe. And we say it because of colonization. So if the city council and other people are interested in talking about it and hearing about a different, and we think a better way, then we're certainly willing to have that conversation. Does that make sense?
Thank you so much, Norm. Jeff, your turn.
No prompting, just
Just go for
a
it.
hard act to follow.
Yeah,
Norm, I really
follow on
appreciate your
Norm.
perspective
Yeah.
and bringing this back to colonization, because that's exactly what it is. And maybe I'll just back up one step and just add a little bit more context to the right to remain, if you will, just in terms of our purposes and how and with whom we've arrived at this really, really critical moment that's not just a moment in time, but rather it's a moment that's been long in the making, and that goes back years, if not decades. And much of that history has really been sidelined and left in the dustbin. And so the right to remain, among a lot of things that we've been trying to do, is to try to unearth that really important history and the precedents, not just of like specific policies like strong rent control and vacancy control, but also how those policies came into being and what circumstances. And invariably, it's the tenants, it's the movement from within the grassroots that pushes arguably sympathetic policymakers to finally act. And so the very existence of SROs today is deeply rooted in that history of colonization, of racial containment, of ghettoization, but also rooted in survival, rooted in resistance, and even rooted in thriving even within such adverse living environments and circumstances that you're hearing about from my fellow panelists today. So we've been really tackling these questions for a number of years now, and it was nice to hear, you know, Wendy encapsulating some of the circumstances behind why this particular moment of achieving vacancy control, or perhaps put differently, reversing vacancy decontrol and setting in place a policy that just makes sense from a human perspective is so critical. And so that's the right to remain, is really just our purpose is to really help to facilitate that and to help to support the tenant movement here in the Downtown Eastside to make this all come true. So Wendy's asked me to provide a little bit of that historical scope, and I don't think I have much to offer in terms of the nerdy policy stuff, only to say that we have thought about vacancy control and rent control more broadly in a longer historical sense. And I guess maybe the message to the audience here is that it's not radical, it's actually common sense. And it's not unprecedented, in fact. I mean, rent control exists, of course. Most 6 out of 10 provinces in Canada have some form of rent control. Only 2 provinces have this form of rent control called vacancy control between tenancies at the provincial level. Policy that was invented some, I guess, conceived probably 35 to 40 years ago, only in place for a few years in the 1980s, and has since been basically cast aside and neglected for the last 25 or so, 25, 30 years. And so it's not an unprecedented, it's not a radical policy, it's a common sense policy that puts the rights of people to their housing, to their health, to their very lives ahead of the rights of landlords to make a profit. And in that regard, it is the common sense policy that I think it's really easy for people to get behind. And I really hope that folks, when this pivotal moment comes up later in November, can find a way to make your voices heard in support of this really important first step towards figuring out how to, mitigate the real crisis that's unfolding every day.
Okay, we're just going to go over to Emily. And Emily, could you just explain what the city's proposing to do, the options, and then tell us a little bit about the landlord threats? And I've got Nicole on the speakers list after Emily and
Great.
Okay,
Thanks so
Emily.
much, Wendy. Great. We can't see you anymore, Wendy, just so you
I
know.
think you're on mute, maybe on our end.
Can other folks hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. So I'm just going to respond quickly to a question that was in the chat. I know we're going to have questions at the end, but I just want to explain very, very quickly that there's sort of a question about legality about increasing rent so much, and I just want to clarify that yes, there are rules around what a landlord can increase rent every single year. It is generally around 1.5%, 2%, depending on the year, and that is set by the provincial government. The problem, though, is that there's no rules on how much the rent increases between tenants. So that's when we're seeing these huge increases. And that's why it's technically legal that this happens, is because we don't have real rent control, which is what we're fighting for here today. So Wendy, to your question and to your point about what the city's proposal is, they essentially have, city staff essentially have 3 options that we expect them to report back to council on November 16th or thereabouts. And those 3 options, I'm just going to summarize them quickly here. So the first option is that there would be no rent increase in between tenancies and SROs. So that means that the rent could go up by the provincially allowed increase annually. It's around 1.5%. They've set it at 1.5% for 2022, but there wouldn't be any increases in between tenancies, which would eliminate the incentive for landlords to replace tenants and give a whole lot more housing security to tenants. The second option is that there would be a moderate rent increase in between tenants. So we expect the city to set that rate at around, or that option, the moderate option, at around 2%. And that would be minus the provincial rent increase if the landlord has already raised the rent during the year. So it's a little bit complicated, but they would basically have a formula for how much the landlord could increase the rent if there was a change in tenants. So that moderate percentage would be around 2% in between tenants. And they're saying that for that option, the rent increase would only happen once per year, even if there is a more than one change of tenants. So there'd be one increase potentially of 2% if tenants changed. And then the third option that the city, we're expecting them to present, is a higher rent increase in between tenancies. We expect them to set this higher, or to present this higher option, at around 5%. And again, there would be a calculation of how much the landlord would be able to increase the rent, depending on whether they have done the provincial annual rent increase yet that year. But it would be a maximum of 5%. And again, the rent would only increase in between tenants once, even if there were multiple turnovers. So those are sort of the 3 options that we expect the city to present. The first being 0 increase, the second being a moderate increase around 2%, and the third being a higher increase around 5%. And that's what we expect the proposal to be. And that will come to City Council, we think, around November 16th, but it hasn't yet been set in stone what that date is. So I'm just going to switch gears and spend a little bit of time talking about what the landlords might say, sort of refuting this proposal. And one of the things that we hear landlords say quite a bit is that they won't have any incentive or ability to invest in maintaining and repairing the building if we have vacancy control. So they're not happy with vacancy control. They don't want it. They don't think that it should happen. And this is one of the main arguments that they're presenting in opposition to it. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that and respond to that. So first of all, I want to address the notion that landlords will have less incentive to invest in their buildings if they're prevented from making unlimited profit. You know, as Jeff said, it's just a common sense idea to reshape how we think about rent and shifting it away from being a commodity, housing being a commodity, to housing being a human right. You know, that said, landlords do have this idea that they should be able to make unlimited profit. And I just want to decouple that idea, the concept of making money, from the idea that the landlord is going to be incentivized to maintain their building. Those two things are separate. So by very virtue of them being a landlord, the property owner has a legal responsibility to provide housing that is suitable for human habitation. This responsibility exists now, and it will continue to exist if vacancy control is brought into place. This responsibility is explicitly stated in law. Section 32 of the Residential Tenancy Act says that a landlord has to maintain the rental unit to a place that is suitable for human habitation. And this is also reflected in Vancouver's municipal standards of property maintenance bylaws. So this is set in the law. They have a legal responsibility to maintain their units. They cannot get out of it just because they might be making slightly less money. And, you know, we know now that so many tenants, and we've heard from tenants on the panel today, that tenants are living in completely unacceptable conditions because the landlords are unwilling to do the necessary repairs. And to me, this demonstrates that the ability to increase rent to whatever they want, thereby making more money, does not necessarily translate into doing more maintenance. So the two ideas are completely, they're decoupled, they're separate ideas. And also, I would like to say that if vacancy control were implemented, the tenants would have more housing security. The landlords would no longer have a economic incentive to replace those tenants. So therefore, tenants would be more able to hold landlords accountable to those standards of repair and maintenance that than currently, because they have more housing, they would have more housing security. That all being said, some landlords might be genuinely concerned about their ability to finance repairs if vacancy control is brought into place. And the City of Vancouver has recognized the need to support landlords who are willing to do repairs. We see this recognized in the SRO Revitalization Action Plan to support landlords in maintaining SROs. So that support does exist. And additionally, and perhaps more importantly, there's a very recent change to provincial law, which actually allows landlords to ask for an additional rent increase for a couple of very specific reasons. And I'm just going to tell you what those reasons are. It's a little jargony, but I'm just going to tell you what they are. So landlords can ask for an additional rent increase if they have, quote, incurred a financial loss from an extraordinary expense in operating the property, or if they have incurred a financial loss for the financing costs of purchasing a residential property, or for costs associated with capital expenditures. So put in plain language, this means that a landlord can ask for more rent if they have invested a lot of money in the building and feel that the amount of rent they're currently getting isn't enough to compensate them for these investments, or if they're not unable to make these investments without more rent. In these circumstances, they would need to justify their request to a residential tenancy branch arbitrator. They would need to show that the additional rent increase is justified. So the bottom line is that a landlord who invests in their property would be able to ask for more rent if they need it, but they need to justify doing so based on the specific facts of that building, instead of just arbitrarily deciding how much they will charge when there is a change in tenants. And given the immense disparity of power in between tenants and landlords and the huge impact on tenants when rents are raised, it is super reasonable to ask landlords to justify these rent increases on a case-by-case basis. And the law currently gives them a way to do that. So that's what we say in response to landlords saying that they're unable to accept vacancy control because they won't be able to do repairs to their building. And with that, I'll pass it back to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily, for that description. And Alex, can you keep going on the topic of policy and tell us a little bit about jurisdiction, et cetera?
For sure.
Jurisdiction, which is a big word for like which level of government should be doing this?
Yeah, I totally will. And I hope I don't put anyone to sleep with, with the points I'm going to make.
That's okay. We've got our eyes on the big horizon, but we want to hear the details.
Okay, great. So I have 3 points to raise about the legal side of things that are going to focus on jurisdiction mainly. So one of the arguments that many people have raised about the city introducing vacancy control is that it should be the province that does so instead. Like Emily just mentioned, there's all sorts of rules that guide how the Residential Tenancies Act applies to units. And so many people, including people at the city, are asking, well, shouldn't it then be the province that introduces these rules instead? And so, so I just want to really focus on that particular question. And I'm happy to answer any questions about it as well, although I may not know all of the answers. So there's no question that the province does regulate rental rules under the RTA. very recently, a case went to BC courts, which was on a very similar question about whether a municipality could also make rules about residential tenancies. And what the court said is that the RTA makes room for other laws and regulations to apply as well. The big key is that whatever those rules are, that they don't conflict with the province's rules. But put in kind of a brief form, the RTA is not all inclusive. So that means that there is room for municipalities to also introduce rules that apply to SROs and to vacancy control. So the next point I just want to talk about is whether Vancouver specifically has the power to introduce rules about vacancy control. So everything that a municipality can do has to be legislated by the province. So the province has to give it permission to pass bylaws or introduce policies in relation to a particular policy area. And so in Vancouver, we have to look at the Vancouver Charter to see what the city is allowed to do and what it cannot do. And there's nothing specific in the Vancouver Charter that says that the city can introduce vacancy control, but the city does have the ability to make bylaws for person or business that's carrying on business that requires a license. And so the city has really broad powers. The definition for licensing is actually really broad in terms of what's allowed, and regulating is also really broadly defined under the Vancouver Charter. So this gives the city of Vancouver pretty broad power to introduce licensing rules in relation to business operations, including for SROs. And then the third point that I just want to briefly talk about is enforcement. So even if the city does introduce rules, does it have the power to actually make sure that they're followed? And so the city can introduce forms of taxation or forms of fines that are allowed under its capacities in the Vancouver Charter. I know that the city and city staff are already thinking about the ways in which they can ensure that if vacancy control is introduced, that it's monitored and that there's some kind of capability for people to challenge if a landlord doesn't comply with it. But what I want to add to that is I think there's also an obligation on the city to make sure that there's advocacy help for people living in SROs, that if they're faced with landlords who are violating a future vacancy control rule, that they have an ability to make sure there's advocates or lawyers or other forms of assistance to challenge what it is that the landlord is doing. And this is not unusual. Many municipalities have created pockets of funding called things like the Tenant Defense Fund or tenant support grants, specifically for people who are living in housing that might be subject to landlords who are going to try to, get around rules that are there. So I think it's really important that when the city is thinking about how it's going to ensure that whatever vacancy control rules are put in place are monitored, that they also consider a defense fund for tenants who are in SROs or who are trying to obtain an SRO so that they can advance their rights. So those are the three things that I just wanted to briefly talk about. The reasons why vacancy control is not just a provincial thing, why the municipality can also do it, specifically how the city of Vancouver can introduce it through their broad powers under licensing. And number three, just talking about enforcement and looking at enforcement more broadly. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alex. I'm Alex from DTE Law, and I think if I was a city councilor and I heard all of these talented speakers, I would be voting in favor of these. 16th, wouldn't you? But before we hear from the audience with your questions, I'm going to pass this over to Tintin, who's going to tell everybody how they can get involved in this campaign.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Wendy. So this is a historic decision that'll be coming up on November 16th. And to reiterate, it is a once in a generation moment for Downtown Eastside residents at City Hall. And now that we're in the last 2 weeks of a 20-year long campaign, we need to fight with everything we've got so that we can honor the work of everyone who's been doing this for the past 2 decades. And that we can prevent homelessness, support SRO tenants, and win real rent control. As we know, landlords are already organizing against us, but we have power in numbers. There are more tenants than there are landlords. And so we can out-organize them. So what can you do to support? Well, there are a couple of things that you can do that'll have an impact on pushing this motion through. So one thing you can do is write a letter. We've gotten around 100 letters written by vacancy control supporters that we know about so far, and we're hoping for another 400 in the next 2 weeks. So there's a link that I hope will be dropped in the chat, but it's srorentcontrol.ca. Alternatively, you can sign up to speak. Our goal is to have 200 speakers signed up to speak, and tenants will be speaking at the hearing from this very room. And also, please tell your friends and mobilize them to write letters as well. So I guess another thing to talk about is why are writing letters and signing up to speak an important act to do? Well, because it works. So there have been many motions that we didn't think that would pass that were voted on unanimously because of public pressure. So a recent example is the decision to support an application for a safe drug compassion club. That happened, I think, 2 weeks ago, October 7th or 8th. And this is how we make our voices heard at City Hall and bring tangible changes to the Downtown Eastside. If we organize our communities in support of SRO tenants and prevent an increase in homelessness, we can win real rent control and we can win a more affordable city. So I encourage everyone to write a letter to council right now. Go to srorentcontrol.ca and please get your friends to write a letter too. Building a movement for tenant power takes all of us to be effective, and I really believe that we can do this. So other things that are coming up, oh yes, email dts.sro.collab@gmail.com to get information about joining the delegation as a speaker, or watch the hearing live as well. That should probably be on November 16th or shortly thereafter. And then there's also an online rally for rent control on Friday, November 12th from 5:30 to 6:30. So yes, please, let's organize together and win vacancy control in SROs, and let's keep fighting to make Vancouver a city where everyone's needs are met. Yeah, solidarity amongst tenants.
Awesome panelists. That was so great. So we're going to open up the floor to questions or comments. I'm going to try to get SRO tenants to answer everybody's questions. If it's technical, these guys are techno nerds too that meet every week. A lot of the folks here in the room, so they'll take a stab at some of the techno questions too. We're here till 9. We have an hour to talk. So let's open it up. Richard?
I just wanted to add one point. The SRO stock is not like a huge stock. It's only about maybe 1.5% of the 52% of the population living in the Lower Mainland are renters. So it's only a small stock of maybe 4,000 suites. So it's not like it's a lot, but it matters. That's all I want.
Okay, questions? Aaron, do you want to come up and read the or use the mic? Okay. They can't hear.
You're gonna get a mic.
Sounds good. So in the chat, Ben from Cope wants to ask the panel why someone might prefer to live on the streets instead of in a private SRO room.
Okay, who wants to take it?
I knew an elderly man who was homeless every summer because it was warm. And the reason why he chose to be homeless every summer because his building was so poorly maintained and so full of insects and vermin that gave him a break. That's why somebody would choose to live on the streets, but it's that basically that's very, very rare.
And it's kind of a hideous choice for those that make it. Erica, do you wanna come up to the-
One of the reasons is security. You, okay, one of the reasons would be security. You get, you feel way more secure outside than you would inside because people can't see what you're going through inside. And when you're in the public, you know, like you got police and other people on the street who can who can assist you with whatever problems you're going through, whereas you're paying rent and not getting the help and support you need inside. Whereas like on the street, you're not paying anything, and yet your property, yourself, feels safer outside.
I remember when the Balmoral closed down and the Regent, the tenants at the Balmoral said they'd rather keep their SRO than be homeless. But it is an issue with the conditions of the housing being so bad. But this decision that's coming to council won't actually improve the housing conditions in the SROs, which are atrocious. It will only help with the affordability question, and we will all have to keep working together, and we are planning on doing that at the SRO Collaborative to address the habitability issues. Okay, Nicole?
There's one thing everybody has to realize. If you throw 4,000 more people on the street with the homeless that are already increasingly too high, what is going to happen? You're going to have law enforcement come and push everybody out of the city. It's going to happen for a fact because they will not be able to have the resources to maintain 4,000 plus what's already out there. The homeless that are out there that like being out there are not going to be okay with 4,000 more people joining them. And that's the number that's going to happen if there's no rent control.
Next question. Oh, somebody on the screen? Okay. Go ahead, Norm.
So I see that Jean posted a question about why we want to preserve the SROs, and it's not so much about preserving the SROs as if we're able to explore and expand the concept of decolonizing housing, then it goes beyond the BC housing approach, which is let's put people in boxes, and that's all they do. All they care about, as long as we put someone in a box and they're off the street, we're done. And then, well, if they need other services, well, someone else does that. We'll contract that to one of the housing societies and they do that other stuff. We just put people in boxes, which is another way of saying, well, that's what they do to people when they die. So we want to decolonize that approach and say, no, it's not about separating and isolating and dividing people. It's about reconnecting people and rebuilding relationships and community. And that's what creates healthy and stronger human beings. You know, we know from the work we do that the fastest growing mental health issue globally in cities is loneliness, because colonization has divided people and separated people and isolated people so that it's harder for them to gather together in strength and in numbers. So decolonizing means actually engaging and reconnecting and uniting around issues that affect all of us. So it's a Yeah, so it's a bigger process, we hope.
Thank you, Norm. It is a bigger process, and we're all going to be leaning in there with our shoulders together after we get through this very first step at City Council. Very first step of many other steps that have been going on as we fight for tenants' rights and for a decolonized vision and a holistic vision for housing. Other questions up there? Nora, I only see Nora's hand. Any other questions?
Sure. So I will go back into the chat. To the folks on the screen, we are just going to be hopping back and forth on Zoom for the panelists, just for the sake of simplicity. But if folks have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat to our staff or to panel as well. So this question from the chat from Kambajuk Jarrett. Is it safe for the panel to let us know where they live, or will that contribute to more harassment?
Oh, that's such a good question. We are constantly navigating that question. It's like walking on broken glass. Does anybody want to take it? Is it safe to really be doing this?
In some places, I would say, no, it's not safe. And we have a saying here about poking the bear. So sometimes we don't want to poke the bear, and we usually discuss it amongst ourselves to go, is this dangerous for you? Do you not want to be in the picture? Or do you want to poke the bear and maybe create problems for yourself, which is possible? So yes and no.
Well, I know for a fact that because of where I last lived in the last SRO and the problems of what occurred there due to the fact that I got tenants together and created a, a building committee and got repairs done and such, it ended up putting a huge target on my back. And yeah, it got fearful for living there at the end due to like management staff and other such like authority figures. It just got dangerous to live there. So yeah, I wouldn't want to have that kind of target on my back again.
We've been really quiet with vacancy control up until now because we've been petrified that if the word gets out to the landlords too early, that they'll go into a quickly, let's get rid of everybody before the law changes mode. So we're kind of gloves off right now publicly. We're getting out there with this panel. The landlords know about it, but it is a worry, and we do need to factor that in. And there's so many tenants that won't speak out because their landlord, they're hanging by a wire. And don't have the kind of level of protection that these guys have who come to meetings every week and know that they can get some backup whenever they need it. Yeah, I wanted to ask.
SRO tenant that's living in anything housing operated SRO right now, not about that.
Wouldn't be safe for any of them to speak publicly because they definitely have targets on their backs, but Chloe doesn't live in their buildings anymore. So Chloe, do you want to say something? And we put up the bingo card that you made.
Yes. So I made this bingo card about micro suites, just like the trendy buzzwords they use for marketing these renovated SROs. An SRO is an SRO. It doesn't matter how much you renovate it, it's still an SRO. Nothing fancy. So living balance. I lived at the Shamrock in 2013, and from 2013 to 2014, there were about between 7 and 10 landlords that came and left that just couldn't handle the low income tenants that were in the building, and in 2014, everyone was rent evicted. Uh, Everybody that was living there either got paid to move out or forcefully evicted. And then they painted all the walls hipster lime green right before I was like evicted, and they redid all the floors, but they got the tenants. They paid the tenants $10 an hour to refinish the floors and like strip them down to their original hardwood. Um, oh, online. Yes, I found the person who has been posting the Living Balance apartments on Facebook Marketplace. Um, they've got quite a lot of apartments. They're all, around 1,000 plus per month for a renovated SRO. Most of these places, you're sharing the washroom. Your kitchenette is a hot plate. Um, like they're really trying to use these marketing buzzwords to make it seem like, oh, trendy. Oh, this is great for students. Come on down. This is affordable options. Like just all of these things. Like every time I read one of their housing ads, I was just like, oh, more of these buzzwords. Um, there was one I didn't put in there because it took up a lot of space, and it was the one I can't remember which one it was, but they said something about saving money during these uncertain times. Like, oh my God, you're trying to like make the pandemic like a marketing point. Like, oh my God, no.
Thanks so much, Chloe. Are there any other questions from the audience? Pull one out of your hat, Aaron.
Absolutely. So let me just go back to my list. We got a lot. Okay. So next question here is there a list of landlords who will be expected to speak up about this issue? And is there a team to debate when it comes to that point?
Ooh, is there a list of landlords ready to speak to this issue? And are we ready to debate them at City Council?
Yes, yes on both counts. Yeah, let's not like say specifics, but yeah, we know that there's definitely a panel of landlords out there um, targeting this whole thing because they're greedy and they're evil and they just want to push us low income renters out. And it's pretty sad because if you stop and look at the people in prison, they have it better than us, like pedophiles and rapists and murderers. They got a roof, they got 3 meals a day, and clothing on their back that's clean, they're properly well kept, and they have more rights than all of us out here. And that is sad and scary. So,
Yeah, so there's a notorious landlord, I won't mention their name, very notorious, and they own 4 or 5 hotels in the neighborhood. One of them on Granville Street, and they've already pushed out 2 floors of their building are empty, and they are raising the rents from 500 to 750 for new tenants, and they bribed people to leave with $500 to $1,000, a combination of harassment and bribes. And that landlord has been at every SRO meeting that I've seen since the beginning of my time organizing with Jean back in from 2005 till now. So I will be very interested to debate that landlord in my speech or prepare others to do that if that landlord speaks before us. Or the landlord might be just there to take stock on who shows up from their buildings to make sure that the pressure goes on or the punishments happen to the tenants who speak out. We've considered like having tenants speak with a bag over their head, a paper bag, just for effect, but it actually, the people's voices are recognizable by their landlords, know exactly who they are, so it wouldn't be safe to do that for people in the hot spots. But there are other tenants that are like here today that are prepared to speak, that are in a better position to be able to do that.
I said I'm in a hot spot and I'll still do it just because I know that on the overall, for every negative that they can throw at it, there's about 5 positive I can throw back at them.
I saw Nicole's landlord and Tim Hortons today in the lineup. I was right behind them, and I was sweet talking them basically a lot, just in case there's a backlash. So we have to do a lot of juggling in the community. Any other questions? That was a great question.
Yeah, so before we get to the next question, I'll just say we have another message in the chat from Joey. Folks on BC Disability Assistance on average only receive $375 a month for shelter. # raise the rates. And
That's our next battle. We're first working on rent control, and then we're gonna target the rest of the problem.
right.
What
And
problem?
What was the question? What was the
Yep,
question?
the next question is, aren't landlords allowed to raise rent just a small percentage each year? How is increasing rent double or 1/3 legal between tenants?
Anybody other than Nicole and I who've been chit-chatting on the mic want to answer this?
Why is it legal? Why indeed is it legal? It's a market-driven system, and they can charge whatever the market will bear. Now, we have a shortage of housing all through North America, as a matter of fact, on all levels of the market. We're speaking, as Richard has said, specifically about one very small part of the rental market in Vancouver, 1.5%. But bear in mind, these are the most vulnerable people in our population, and that's why it's so important. Homelessness for poor people, as I mentioned earlier, is actually lethal. People die. It's not an inconvenience. It's extremely dangerous. And as you said, how are they able to do it? Well, you know, how they charge, as I said, what the market will bear. It's capitalism. I prefer, say, capitalism rather than colonialism, but I think they dovetail together quite nicely.
Thanks. Next question.
Sure. Next question is just a question for discussion. Is there anything to prevent SRO establishments from seeking alternate designations as micro units or others to get around vacancy control?
Well, maybe I'll take this one. The SRA bylaw is the big conversion bylaw that's been in place since 2005. And so far, I think a landlord has tried to take it to court and it didn't get quite shot down. But so far so good. That SRA bylaw is preventing single room occupancy from converting to other uses. So we need to keep that bylaw, and I think the council already voted in favor of the conversion fee, which is $230,000 per unit. So if a landlord wants to do something else with that property, like turn it into micro lofts, whatever, put in a bathroom, they technically should be paying $230,000 per unit. But keep in mind, the city can waive that. It's not like, you know, we're walking around with a ticket book and giving the landlords these tickets. It's a way to get the landlord into the city hall to negotiate with them if the landlord wants to do this conversion of their property. But the landlords do call their places micro lofts, as Chloe said, as part of their advertising, but that's the tongue in cheek of that bingo card is they're micro lofts, but they're still just SROs, micro suites.
Micro suites and micro lofts are different things. Like micro suites are converted SROs. Like I've seen, I was doing some research on I'm looking up housing, and I have seen some of these micro lofts, but we're not talking about micro lofts. Micro lofts would be like a small, like junior loft kind of style apartment, but that's not an SRO. Like that's it's like a studio kind of thing. It's not like these old 100-year-old SROs. It's different, two different things. Yeah.
But if they converted them, wouldn't the landlords be required to pay the tax, the property tax of every year if any one of those suites are empty. Because I know that they have a law in place for landlords and property owners. If they own more than one property and they have a place vacant for a certain amount of time, they have to pay property tax on every piece of property.
That's true, but just the last, I think, just this thing to say is, those SROs would be so valuable to the landlords if they turned into condos, that how much money they would make from them would be, they're making multiple millions right now on sales. They would make like tens of millions, maybe 100 million on selling condominiums. Condominiums are where the money's at. So we're really, we have to keep that bylaw in place. And even if they have to pay taxes, it's still worth it for them to try to convert to condos. Next question. How much time have we got left? What time is it now? 8:26. We got a half an hour if people want to keep going. Any other questions, Aaron?
Yeah, oh, tons. So next question here is which SROs have removed people and moved new people into their buildings?
So we have a list in our office. It's up on our wall, and we put a yellow sticker beside all the hotels that we've lost to this process. The ones that have like completely converted out of reach. How many of them? There's probably about 20 out of 100. The BC government just bought 6 of those upscaled properties back. So so now it's a little bit fewer. And then there's a whole bunch of properties like the ones that were discussed today that are in process. So Tom's Place, Richard's, Nicole's, others that are here in the room, they're in process. So that means, because this process is invisibilized, so maybe there's 5 tenants under pressure that are getting pushed out and the rents are going up, and then you'll go to another building and there'll be another 10 that are out. There's the Lotus Hotel on Abbott Street, 120, 130 tenants, and there's only 20 tenants left in there on low income, and the other are all paying $1,200 a month. So it's a real gamut across the whole board. But I think with this vacancy control in place, we're going to slow that process down, or if not stop it altogether, and take stock and work on reclaiming and building the holistic vision for tenant control and community control and connection in these places. Next question.
Awesome. So I think because there's a ton of interest in the chat, we're going to spotlight Nora for her question.
Nora? You go off mute.
Hi there. Hi. How's it going? I live in a PHS housing. I just want to know if that would be changed as well. Doubt it very much, because they're also, like, I told them about this and they're very proactive, and they're like, I can't believe this is happening. And I know a bunch of my friends that live in independent SROs, and the rents are changing and stuff like that. And it's ridiculous. And I think it's positively, I think it's illegal technically for them to automatically change a room after someone leaves and double it, or like 1/3 of it, right? I just want to know, like, is that I forget her name, the legal lady, if she's still there. How is that even legal? How is that even legal technically? Like, seriously.
Emily, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah.
Thanks, Nora, for your excellent question.
For sure. Thanks so much. So I think, let me just repeat the question back to make sure I got it. So how is it legal for rents to double, or, go up by 1/3 or whatever percentage? Like, how is that legal? Is that the question?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so like during one tenancy, you're right, that wouldn't be legal. But when someone moves out and someone else moves in, the new contract, like the new tenancy agreement, can be set at whatever the landlord wants. There is zero law between one tenant to another. Does that make sense? So yeah, just like a tenant of the rent can only increase by 1.5% if your contract is in place the entire time. But as soon as that contract ends and another contract starts, then the new tenancy agreement, the new person comes in and the landlord can say, hey, the rent for this unit is $3,000. And there is like zero law to prevent them from doing that. They can start the new contract at whatever they want. And that's exactly what we're like trying to address with this, is to put some regulation in place and to have the city address that loophole, because it's such a giant loophole and it incentivizes landlords trying to kick people out, right? Because they know that they can get a rent increase that would otherwise be legal if they kick someone out and bring someone new in, because they're not tied to the same rules in that case.
Yeah, Nora,
Okay.
it will be illegal after this motion or this rule passes at City Hall on November 16th. So please come and help us get City Council to make this illegal, make that illegal, that very thing that you just said. And then the other thing, Nora, you asked about was the BC Housing, the PHS, the Portland Hotel Society rooms, and whether or not this would affect their rooms. I'm not sure about that. We'll probably find out on November 16th, but their rooms are pretty much set at welfare rate, like $375 per month, right? Is that the case in your place?
Yeah.
Oh, you're on mute.
I'm on disability. And CPP as well. So disability pays for the rent, and then CPP at the end of the month pays me to live, for my food and my bus fare and all that stuff.
Right.
And,
So it's,
uh,
yeah, your rent is already protected, and it's not doubling or tripling when you move out and somebody moves in. It's just the privately owned places, the places that are owned by private investors. So you live in housing, there's about, I think,
There's
3,000 tenants living in your type of room, and same with some of the tenants in the room here living in BC Housing and PHS and Atira. There's about 3,000 rooms. Well, we're talking about the 4,000 privately owned ones
I
that
know.
are
I
owned
know
by
a
the
bunch of
investors who are
friends.
trying to make a big buck.
Yeah, and I know
And
a
we
bunch
know
of
there's
friends.
problems with the 3,000 in the nonprofit run rooms and BC Housing run, and we've got to do something about that. But we have to put the fire out first on the privately owned. That's our number one priority at this moment.
Yeah, and I totally agree, because I know a lot of friends that
We can't hear you, Nora.
Oh. Yeah.
No, Nora.
Yeah.
Can we answer your questions?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay. Anybody else up there? What on the any other questions?
I think I'll move to the next one in the chat here. How effective is letter sending, and is there a certain amount of letters that, once reached, causes the council to finally feel the pressure to make change?
More letters, the better. And definitely it does work. It's like petitions. The more signatures you get, the more it's hard to ignore.
A long time ago, they used to think that one letter is worth 1,000 people expressing their opinion. So yeah, letters are very powerful. If somebody takes the time to write a letter, it means something.
I think that writing letters is very effective, but I also think that grassroots organizing is what gets us to this point, where letter writing will even be effective. So yes, but it's also really important to have a strong base of organized tenants and a strong tenant movement Otherwise, there's no incentive to listen to just a bunch of letters if there isn't already a strong movement and strong momentum to get these big changes to be made. Yeah.
Hey, Tanya, are you still up there? Do you want to say something about what you helped make happen in terms of the Renters Advisory Committee at the city?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tanya Webking. Yeah,
Oh yeah, go for it.
thank you. It's been really amazing listening to everyone. Yeah, a lot is going on. So we are a new committee, so we are just establishing our work for the year. I have been out of Vancouver, so I just moved back this summer, but we just had our first working group, and we had everyone involved was interested in supporting this. So we do have full support from the Renters Advisory Committee. We don't have enough time to do a formal statement. We haven't entirely put together our media team. I'm co-chair, so I'm busy trying to get things organized. Apologies. So we're getting there, but I will be speaking on behalf of City Council. I also want to be prepared to have some clapbacks if they do try to question me. I have been organizing for several years, so I'm very comfortable standing my ground. And as an Indigenous woman, I want to call them on decolonizing housing. There should be no homeless people on stolen land. So I definitely am going to call that into my statement, which we will be determining. And our next meeting is the week prior. So we're going to be solidifying that. Yeah, and I'm really involved. I'm going to be leading the working group for the Vancouver Tenants Union for City Hall. Just really getting into the work and appreciating Wendy and Jean and everyone else, the keepers of the fire. I've been gone for a while, but I'm ready to get connected. Mossy.
Thank you, Tanya. So we have about 20 minutes left for the super keeners that are still left up there on the screen. If there's any other questions or comments and questions that tenants can answer. Any other questions, Aaron?
Oh, yes. A lot. It's amazing. Let's see.
Jeff just said there's a whole side panel happening in the chat box.
Oh yeah, we have, so on the main Zoom screen here, the chat notification has maxed out. It just says 99 plus. So next up is, has anyone spoke to the City of Vancouver about decreasing property taxes for privately owned SROs? They pay the same as market rate rentals currently.
Any of Norm, do you want to take a stab at that one? No. Okay, well, I would say that we should not decrease the taxes of any of these SRO tenant landlords at all until they are ready to participate with the community in a better plan for their hotel. So that will be the immediate next step after we win this vacancy control. If we win it, will be to work with those private landlords and see which ones are on side, but there will be no cookies for landlords. No deals, no nothing until they are ready to be on board to work with the community to make their places better places to live. Anybody else want to say that?
The taxes on SRO properties should be increased because we don't have the same legal rights as other people in rental establishments. So as long as the laws are different, their taxes should be increased.
And we could look at that, but not until there's some concrete action on the table about how we're going to make tenants' lives better in those places. And hopefully they'll go along with our vision for tenant committees in the buildings and tenant-led initiatives and tenants helping tenants and work on rehabilitation plan and get federal money for that. But unless they're coming to the table with something, there'll be no breaks. Norm, I see your hand up.
Well, I always take the
Oh, you're
position
on
that,
mute.
Well, I think I unmuted, didn't I unmute?
Still mute, or maybe it's just on our end. Okay, go for it now. We can hear you now.
Okay. So in some cases, I think telling city council, doing this is the least you can do. It's not near the most you can do. It's not even, half of what you can possibly do. This is almost literally the least you could do to help protect the people who are the most vulnerable, who have suffered the most under COVID, under capitalism, under patriarchy, under discrimination, under all of these things. This is the least you can do. Don't and don't settle for the least that they can do either, because too often we settle for the least that politicians or leaders, so-called leaders, can do, and we have to start to expect and demand more from leadership than the least that they can do.
Aaron, more questions?
Absolutely. So next up is, does Atira have private run SROs that aren't owned by BC Housing?
Very good question. Somebody who
Great
knows what
question.
they're talking about. Yes, Atira is a nonprofit, but they also have a for-profit arm. And their for-profit arm, called Atira Property Management, I think, is operating 10 privately owned SROs that are mostly in atrocious condition. So this rule coming up, if it changes, will apply to those hotels as well. Although the tenants in those hotels do have, the Argyle? No, not that. No, that's BC Housing owned. But I'm thinking of the London and no, not the Savoy. The Savoy's BC Housing owned. The Flint, the Patrick Anthony, which Cordova Rooms, I think is already BC Housing. Anyhow, we have a list in our office, but they're mostly in really atrocious conditions. So this rule will apply to those buildings as well, but they're already rent controlled. Like Atira's keeping the rents down in those places, which is good.
Control of anything else. And they prevent the tenants from having any say, and it should be tenant-run buildings in these privately SROs. That's what we're working to achieve, and trying to help people like understand they do have a right to stand up for themselves, their rights as just having the ability to like make change in their place, positive change, without having the feeling you're gonna get evicted. But until we get rent control, we can't do that.
Okay, Erica's gonna say something.
I actually live in one of Atira's buildings in Savoy. Our building was actually a really nice place to stay maybe 2 years ago. But since COVID hit the Downtown Eastside, it's gone steadily downhill in an actually really fast spiral. And we haven't had a working manager there for maybe since May this year. There are people that should be evicted that aren't getting evicted. There are even staff should be fired. I get harassed weekly from one of the night attendants who's constantly asking me to borrow money, and if I say no, she's rude, she's obnoxious, she slams doors on me. Staff knows about it, but nobody does a thing. Yeah, that place too. I mean, I used to I was trying to get my son, to check on my son a year and a half ago, and they kept telling me he was just here. I said my son wouldn't go a day without phoning me. And I kept asking. I even went over there, banged on the door, asked to go upstairs. They wouldn't let me. They kept telling me that I was just overly protective. And I kept saying, no, this is a mother's instinct. I know something's wrong with my son, and kept going back. They kept saying, oh no, he was just here. He just got his meal. And that was all a pile of crap. I mean, and even maybe a month ago or a little over a month ago, I found out they were still collecting his rent. My son died 17 months ago. And that was just stopped, just like in the past few weeks. 4 days. Yeah. And I know there's a lot of things that need to be done, especially with the Tira. They're in the public eye right now, and I really don't give a shit if they try to get after me and try and kick me out of my room, because I'm also in the public eye. And a lot of people know what I've been going through and what I've been dealing with and how I've been trying to deal with it. So if they try to evict me, they've got a really big lawsuit on their hands, because I've got all the paperwork, I've got the paper trail, I've got the people behind me. So I think I'm finally ready to kick ass here.
Hands up to you, Erica. Any other questions?
Yeah, so next up is, the question is, are some SROs owned by offshore owners? Is SRO housing vulnerable to the global housing market? And what kind of protections are needed and are possible for Vancouver's SROs in this global market?
I think I'm the only one. Danny's shaking her head. She probably knows the answer to this one too, but we don't think that the SROs are owned by offshore people at all. Like this is not a foreign investor myth thing happening here. They're all local people. A lot of them are operating their own SROs, like the Sahodas, and others. I won't mention names, but we pretty much know all of the owners. Norm, did you have your hand up?
We are subject to the influence of the global market, though. So there is global investment in real estate that's happening around the world. So this is happening in cities around the world, where the people who live in those cities are being priced out of the market because investors are buying properties as an investment, often converting them to Airbnb, where they get nightly rentals. And they really only have to rent them like 10 nights out of the month in order to make profit. And then, like most recently, the U.S. tax proposal is going to tax wealth on wealth for the 1,000 most wealthy people in America, but they're going to exempt real estate. So a lot of investment, if that is an indicator, then people will start flowing their investments more towards real estate than simply stocks and bonds, because it'll be exempted from that new wealth tax that the United States is proposing. So there is a global shift for investment in real estate, and people around the world are suffering just as Vancouver is.
Hopefully what we do here can be a model to other low-income communities everywhere. We're going to fight back, but it's a systemically stuck situation in many different angles. So every time we get one little thing, there's 100 more things we got to keep fighting for. And each time we peel back a layer, there's another layer there to work on, but we're committed, and you want to keep investing and supporting communities that are committed to each other, to have these big battles with these. Yeah, it's a global thing, like Norm said. Next question, Aaron, how much time do we have left?
10 minutes left.
10 minutes, okay, good.
So the next question is, what if vacancy control results in disinvestment and further unmet tenants' needs? How do you see the trajectories of affordability and high capital and maintenance costs?
Who wants to take this one?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think Emily addressed at least a good part of the first half of that question, so maybe I'll just do my best to summarize with one word, which is no. Am I right? Yeah. And then I guess maybe I don't know that I have an answer to the second part of the question as much as maybe wait and see. I think it's been mentioned a few times tonight that vacancy control, as Norm so eloquently put, is the least we can do. And what we're not saying there is that there is more to come. And in reinvestment is certainly something that we have our eyes on. It's on the horizon. The stars are aligned, so to speak, at all levels of government to be more favorable to a policy of reinvestment than they have had for the last 30 years. We have just had an election. We have a minority federal government in which housing, including housing rehabilitation, is now at least on the table. So this is the November 16th is the next step in a many step process and fight. And so I guess stay tuned. Go ahead, Norm.
Yeah, I would say investment in SROs is a myth. If anything, I think I put it in the chat that in some ways we've been very nice about naming this initiative vacancy control, because really it's greed control. We're asking people to control their greed. Like they're demanding the right to unlimited profits and unregulated market forces. It's absurd. And I don't know how we got here. I don't know if it started with Gordon Gekko's speech that greed is good, but that's not a moral or ethical position that's defensible. And somehow modern society has got to this point where it should be shameful to be demanding unlimited profits and to have free market capitalism run amok. So that's an argument, debate I'd love to have, and have someone try and defend that position. Yeah.
I think there's one story that I could tell that really illustrates from the tenant's point of view why landlords, this question about disinvestment. There's one hotel that we actually could ask the landlord to make repairs in, and that hotel had vacancy control. And it made it easier for tenants to ask for a repair because there was less likely to be backlash against that tenant and pressure to move out. Because they had vacancy control, the tenants could band together and ask for heat and hot water and not worry about being pressured to leave so that the landlord who wants to throw up their hands and say, okay, I'm not going to do this, I can get richer renters in here. That didn't happen, and we succeeded. If anybody wants to look up Lion Hotel heat in Google, you'll see multiple articles there. We can't do that kind of advocacy in buildings that don't have vacancy control on them, because we could trigger a cascade of evictions. And that landlord could afford it. And we got to know the landlord too.
Landlord did not like to open up his pockets, even though the government gave him a bunch of money. I know this because they had black mold really bad in one of the showers during the pandemic. I'm like, well, look at the kind of drywall they're using. They used regular wall drywall in showers. You're supposed to use that other type of gyprock where it's got a metal type of shear through it, and it's a gyp rock. It's actually a rock, not quite like the white crappy stuff, and it prevents mold. Whereas they didn't have that before, and they have 6 showers, and only one got renovated.
Yeah, and that actually then the gold star answer to this question is actually what Emily said, that the landlord, if they're so desperate to raise the rents, can go make an application to the tenancy board, and then a judge, a housing arbitrator will get the landlord to show their track record of making repairs, show that they've been doing due diligence on the property, and the tenants can provide a defense about why their rent shouldn't be raised, and it will be adjudicated or judged fairly across the board. And that the landlords can do that. So even if vacancy control goes in place, the landlord will have an option. We don't think many of them will succeed at that option, but they can go and we'll be able, it's way more functional, less dysfunctional than what's going on right now. Probably time for one or two more questions.
Yeah, well, I was thinking it's not one individual question, and I also want to say to all the folks that put their questions in the chats tonight, there's just so many. We unfortunately couldn't get to everyone, but I just wanted to group a bunch together. Folks just really want to ask the panel what they can do as individuals, or what they can do in their neighborhoods or with the organizations with whom they work to support vacancy control.
Write the letters and just keep working as a unit, like in all your private SROs. Try and get as many tenants together on board and fight for this right, because when you get this win, we'll be able to conquer and get more down the line.
Don't vote for the Conservatives.
Write the letter for sure. Also form tenant unions in your own buildings. Get to know your neighbors and get to know your community as well. Even if you don't live in an SRO, I think building a strong tenants movement also comes from all kinds of renters, all kinds of tenants. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, passing it on to Jeff.
Yeah, I think I also saw somewhere in the chat feed earlier on, along the similar lines of what can I do? And I think, taking this, writing a letter is key, and maybe just one step further is really talk about yourself in that letter and how this policy affects you. And one person had mentioned, is this vacancy control thing shouldn't just be in the SROs, it should be in all rental housing. Well, absolutely, but everything is connected to everything else. And so it might be worthwhile to really think through how this policy does affect you, even if you don't live in an SRO, but you are a fellow citizen of the city. These are your neighbors that are being affected by these exploitive practices. Just really try to make this a collective problem.
I guarantee you it's going to affect everybody, because like I said, there's going to be 4,000 people homeless, and with the homeless numbers already being far too high, you're going to end up with riots, you're going to end up with all sorts of rebellions, and a lot of taxes going up and a lot of deaths going up. The numbers are just going to increase like all the bad ways.
And Tintin mentioned the need for community organizing, which is like 90% or 100%, 99%. But we also have to, I think, I might be a minority, but I also think we have to organize for elections and make sure that we have renters candidates elected at City Hall. And there's an election at the end of November of 2022. So we do have to make sure that we have sympathetic people, because even as loud as we are on the outside, we need allies to open the doors on the inside. As they say in the art of war, sometimes sometimes one inside is worth 1,000 soldiers on the outside, equal to 1,000. Not to say that they're more important than 1,000 people, because you need the 1,000 or 10,000 or 1,000,000 on the outside, and you need your few on the inside. They're just as important. And Richard?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Norm said, that it's just the right thing to do, isn't it?
I think we should wrap it up. And it was an honor to spend so much time with everybody. And thank you for staying as long as you have. Please check out the SRO rentcontrol.ca link. It gives you instructions there about how to contribute in the next couple of weeks. If Gabby's there online, maybe Gabby, you could say just something quickly about the rally if you're there.
I'm here. Yeah, we're having a rally on Friday, November 12th from 5:30 to 6:30. We'll be hearing from some of the same folks that we heard from today, and it'll all be about vacancy control and how we can win real rent control in the Downtown Eastside and prevent homelessness. And it'll really just be about building power and building like that energy and that momentum when you're in campaign mode, being able to feel that together and feel the community power in that space, working in support of SRO tenants to win vacancy control and to win the city we need. So Friday, November 12th, it'll be online over Zoom. Somebody I think has dropped the Facebook event in the chat and we can do that again. Friday, November 12th, 5:30 to 6:30.
Okay, that's it. And I'm just going to pass it over to Jeff. And thanks for everybody to keep your eyes on the big, big horizon that Norm helped us to see at the start of the meeting.
Yeah, thanks, Norman. Maybe just one more thank you to the Heart of the City Festival for providing us with the opportunity to have this panel tonight. Encourage everyone to support the festival. Plenty more on the program coming up. So thanks once again. Night, everybody.